Tuesday, April 19th meeting of the Wilson School Board to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Martin? Mr.
Here.
McCray? Hi, Mr. Martin. Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge of the flag.
Excuse me, is there any way to turn the volume up? I can barely hear, and I've got this right next to my ear.
We'll work on that, Mr. Martin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So before we get into the first agenda item, I wanted to address something that the district has been dealing with over the last couple days. Last week, the district shared the news of the passing of one of our beloved teachers, Miss Jen Sarns. Jen was a 6th grade reading teacher at Southern and was with the district for 17 years. Her loss has been very difficult and has been felt throughout our entire community. So before we move on to our first agenda item, I would like to take a few minutes to offer time for any board member that would like to speak, which we will then follow with a moment of silence. Dr. Kennedy?
I first met Jen in my first 2 doctoral courses. It was about 10 years ago, maybe, no, about 13 years ago. And it was like an immediate click. We loved the same 3 things. We loved Wilson, we loved Kutztown, she was a twice Kutztown grad, and we loved literacy. And ultimately, she was smart and decided to not continue with the program and be crazy. But we stayed in touch ever since. And I talked to Jen a lot on the phone, especially when she was the board president. And I'm always super careful of using teachers and admins and school staff's time. And I'd always start our conversation out like, okay, Jen, I promise this is only 5 minutes. Except I always schedule an hour because an hour later, we were able to solve all the problems. And we always ended with, see, if we just ran things, everything would be perfect. She was the consummate teacher. She was the teacher everyone wanted to be. She was the teacher everyone wanted to have. And her talent, as mentioned by one of my other teacher friends, Jen, was that she always would seek out the students who needed her the most. She just had the ability to find those kids who didn't quite fit in and pull them into her circle and to make them feel like they were a part of the school at Southern. And, you know, the loss that she leaves this district is just an unbelievable chasm. And she never not had a smile on her face. All of her KU professors remember her. We were just as equally sad at the college this week at the news of her passing. And she just was an absolute light. She was a staunch advocate for children, for Wilson, and for literacy. And I am a better person for having known her.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Mr. Schneider?
I went to high school with Jen. I knew her a long time. I played water polo with her brother. She was our manager, so on road trips, you know, got to know her very, very well. In this role, I reached out to her whenever I needed a teacher perspective on things because I know she'd give me an honest one and she'd give me a thoughtful one. I was lucky enough that 2 of my 3 children were able to have her in some capacity. She really was just one of the finest human beings that I've ever known. And my thoughts and prayers go out to her family.
Thank you.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes, Mr. McCray.
I'd just like to say that I'm thankful that both of my daughters had the opportunity to experience Ms. Sarns as an educator and, quite frankly, as a mentor for their personal development as well. Just last week, my youngest daughter told me how much Ms. Sarns was looking forward to seeing her perform in the Southern musical next month and how inspired she felt by that. Today, she told me how many tears were shed at Southern, including her own, and how she and others took the opportunity to write a final note and read it out loud in her classroom to Ms. Sarns, just in case she was listening. And then she placed it on her desk. So instead of me, who unfortunately had very little direct interaction with Ms. Sarns, I asked my daughters and their friends at Southern what they would like to have known and remembered about her. So here's what they had to say. Ms. Sarns made the classroom fun. Students look forward to seeing her every day because she was such a wonderful, happy, and joyful person. She greeted them and waved at them each morning, and she said goodbye to them each evening as they left for the bus. Ms. Sarns was that teacher everyone wanted to talk to, from past students to even those students who didn't have her. Ms. Sarns was so welcoming. If someone wasn't comfortable speaking to anyone else about an issue at school, she was the person they would go to. I'm going to miss our games of Uno. Ms. Sarns really hated to lose, but we all loved those Jolly Rancher prizes she gave out when we won. And finally, Ms. Sarns got to know you as a whole person. She was super supportive, not just of your academics, but of your sports and your hobbies as well. Ms. Sarns was our biggest cheerleader. So on behalf of myself, my daughters, her friends, and the entire Southern family, our condolences to Ms. Sarns and all who loved and cared for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Dr. Trickett.
So in addition to all the kind and wonderful memories shared about Jen tonight, I want to talk a little bit about some of the impact that she had to the school district, and not just the children at Southern Middle School throughout the last 2 years. For Jen was our union president throughout the entire pandemic, the beginning stages of the pandemic for 2 years. And our entire team, sitting here, the members of this board, spent countless nights working together trying to develop a plan that we felt served the needs of the community and the children, again, not just at Southern, but also in our elementary schools, at West Middle School and the high school. And Jen, being the professional and caring and honest leader that she is, was there every step of the way. And inclusive of that team was Kim Underwood, and they worked with us day and night to ensure that the plan that we developed would meet the children's needs, the needs of our community, but also the needs of our different employee groups. And everyone can share many stories from working with Jen. Some of my fondest memories is the late night text messages, the phone calls, the check-ins, during a very difficult time where we all weren't home. Children weren't home, in your houses, in your basements, at your dining room tables. She was always the person to check in on us, to ask how we were doing, what she could do to help us in implementing and communicating and meeting the needs of all the different groups of people that we serve in this community. She was constantly advocating for everybody, for her kids, for herself, for the members of the teachers group, for all employee groups, for the administrative group, for the board. She was always there to support everybody, and it was exactly the same environment in her classroom. Up until 2 weeks ago, you could go into her room at the end of the school day and could be guaranteed to see students other than her own in her classroom. She exemplified everything that a good educator should be. She was great in the classroom. She cared about kids. She was visible and present at their events. She reached out to them when they needed to be talked to. She cared for them when they needed cared for. And this school district in our community lost one of the best. I also just want to take a moment to recognize the staff at Southern Middle School and the kids and the parents. This has been very difficult, and today was a challenge. The kids came back to our school today and worked through a very difficult set of conversations and emotions. And all of the kids processed it differently. All of the teachers are still processing this very differently. But we're exceptionally proud of them, exceptionally proud of Dean and John and Kim for helping lead this process with the staff, the counselors, the social workers, all of the kids and parents that came in today and supported each other. And we're thankful that we live in a community where we know that when there is adversity, when there's challenges like this, that the full community will grieve together as one and support the school district. So I just want to thank all of you here tonight and those of you watching as we continue to support Jen's family throughout this week and grieve her loss.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. This has been a very difficult couple of days for everyone, and I wanted to thank our administrative team for crafting communications, coordinating counselors for staff and students, and creating a response plan while also trying to process through their own grief. Ms. Sarns was an amazing teacher, a caring, funny, safe person to go to whether you were a student or a colleague. She was magnetic, and she will be deeply missed. My thoughts go out to her students, both current and past, as well as her family at home and at school. And I wanted to share a quote by author Jamie Anderson that helped me just a fraction, and I'm hoping will help others. Grief, I've learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and in that hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go. If everyone would just join me in a moment of silence, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, now to our meeting. First, 1.5 is communications. We have a presentation from Wilson High School students who represented our district in the Model Senate program.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Marconi, one of the advisors of student government. And along with Kelly McDonough, we have 3 awesome students who were able to go with Senator Judy Schwenk. And they'll talk about their experience some. We have Colby Snyder here. We have Nolan Pagolu and Danny Radosh.
Hi, I am Danielle Radosh. I'm a junior here at Wilson, and I'm here with Nolan Pagolu and Colby Snyder, who are seniors. And we recently had the opportunity to be a part of Senator Judy Schwenk's Model Senate. And this included 3 to 4 students from each school across Berks County. And it consisted about 3 sessions, 2 at Senator Schwenk's local office in Muhlenberg. In the last session, we had the opportunity to go to Harrisburg at the Capitol, where we acted as senators by passing legislation and being put into different committees.
Hello. So for the first day, we started debating bills that we were given by Senator Judy Schwenk herself. And one of the unique parts that I thought that was neat was that she actually gave us bills that had been debated by the state senate before on the floor. So I thought it was kind of neat to have students put their own spin on what the bills were. On the second day is actually where a lot of debating came in because both party committees combined, and we started making amendments and riders to the bills to make the bills more bipartisan and appeal to both parties so that at the end, all parties can succeed from all the bills we passed. And then on the third and final session at the Harrisburg office, we actually started off with a big tour of the building, seeing a bunch of people's offices, going to the chambers itself, and even viewing a session.
So if you haven't been to the Capitol before, it is a really beautiful building with lots of unique architecture. And we had the opportunity of sitting in on one of the real Senate sessions. And when we were there, they were honoring some special people from the community. We got to see a religious leader, a police officer, and a college student getting rewarded for their service. And another highlight of the day was meeting the Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman. He was really hospitable. He got to take a tour of his office and even sit in his desk chair and take some pictures with him. And it was really cool to meet him in person, as we have seen him in some election advertisements.
So to conclude our final session, we debated the bills that made it through committee and held a final vote. Thanks to our work during the first two sessions, most of the legislation passed easily with bipartisan support. And we left the program more knowledgeable about the inner workings of our government and the daily responsibilities of our state legislators. So we're so grateful for Wilson's support in allowing us to have this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Um, 1.6, we have a presentation of the high school renovation and field project bids.
Good evening, everyone. So just to provide a backdrop before we get into the presentation, I wanted just to walk down memory lane here. In 2018, the Wilson School District contracted Crabtree, Rohrbaugh, and Associates to conduct a district-wide feasibility study to provide the district with a comprehensive report to use as a resource for long-term decision-making about the district's educational facilities. So phase one, as it's referred to here, is the results of the study, and it included a construction project at our high school, which included a new performing arts center, including an auditorium, black box theater, classroom and rehearsal spaces, as well as a new cafeteria, and would connect the lower and upper houses, and also would provide for improvements to the high school baseball and softball fields complex. So this presentation shows the results of those construction bids. So the first slide here shows the March 2021 estimates for those components of phase one. And we used those estimates for the funding, the borrowing that we did in June of 2021. The second line there is now a finalized version of both the high school additions and renovations and the high school fields. So at the March 28th Public Board Workshop meeting, we had reviewed the details of the high school additions and renovations, but since then we have opened the bid results for the high school fields. So this is now the final version of that. And you can see that the estimated soft costs and the actual bids that came in were significantly higher than the March 2021 estimates. The high school additions and renovations are 25% over that March estimate, and the fields were 37% over that March estimate, for a combined total of 27% over the March estimates. So just to unpack the costs of the high school additions and renovations estimates, just for a review, the base bid came in at $33.8 million, selected alternates came in at $4 million, with total bid project costs of $37.8 million, and architect, engineers, and other soft costs and contingency at $4.5 million, for a total estimate of $42.3 million. The selected alternates included unclassified construction, window replacement at Unit A, window shades at Unit A, painting of corridors at Unit A, paving of contractor staging and laydown area, paving of driveway and staging and laydown area, piping for heat pump units, and HVAC at the lower house, for a total of $4 million. The alternates not included are listed there, which I won't go into detail. However, it totaled $1.8 million. High school baseball and softball fields cost estimates. This is our first public look at this. The base bid came in at $6.4 million. Selected alternates, $131,000, with total bid project costs of $6.5 million. Architect, engineer, and other soft costs and contingency at $1.1 million for a total estimated cost of $7.6 million. This is a view of the baseball and softball field site plan. The base bid does include lights and turf on baseball and the softball field, a press box at each field, and additional parking. The add alternates, however, are also included on the site plan here. So this is a listing of the alternates. Those selected for this particular bid was the unclassified excavation and the logos on the baseball and softball turf, totaling $131,000. The alternates not included were restroom facilities that came in at $633,000 and turf infield at the Burks Place practice field of $228,000 for a total alternates not included of $861,000. So this slide sums up the project funding that was done. The first line is the March 2021 estimates, which we saw on the first slide. The next line is just the rounding up to the $40 million that we did consider borrowing towards the estimated costs. We did anticipate some escalating costs at that time, so we added $3 million to the borrowing. And there was also discussion of anticipated potential land purchase for possibly Phase 2 construction. So overall, you can see the breakdown there between the different components that we borrowed $45 million last June. So this slide kind of brings it all together. So at the top, you can see the borrowing that we just went over on the slide before against the total and final bid and soft cost estimates there. And then on the fourth line down, you can see how those costs compared to the $45 million borrowing compare. So we're 23% over in the funding that we had set aside for the high school additions and renovations, 35% over for the fields, and then over the $45 million borrowing that we did, assuming escalating costs, we're 15% over on the high school additions renovations, 25% over on the fields, and 10% over on the land for a combined comparison of 16% over. And the dollar figures are there, $5.4 million over in the high school additions and renovations, 1.5 on the fields, 200,000 on the land, for a total of $7.1 million over our funding that we originally took out. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Trickett to introduce the administrative recommendation and board discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schlossman. So as the board and community can see, this provides a pretty comprehensive financial update in regards to our Phase 1 project. It takes you kind of through a step-by-step guide of how the bids were kind of unpacked and analyzed throughout the last few weeks. So where that brings us tonight is for the board to have some conversation and ultimately come to a decision on what to do. And there really is just two choices to make. One would be to accept the bids as presented. The bids can't be reopened and modified at this time, so it's to accept them as they are. They are listed on the agenda in two different agenda items. This understanding, though, with accepting and awarding the bids would be that we are going to move forward with funding these projects. So it's a commitment to fund these projects. And based on where we are with our current structure of borrowing, there are not sufficient funds to cover both parts of Phase 1. So that would need to be a consideration for the board this evening. Option 2 would be to reject the bids. And that essentially means that we're not going to award any of these bids at this present time. It gives us time as a team to kind of regroup, to revisit and reevaluate where we are, where the market is, and what's changed perhaps over the last year or more, look at priorities, and discuss where we want to move from there. So our recommendation from the administrative team is that tonight we consider rejecting the bids as presented. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Cocker at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Are there any questions from the board in relation to the presentation or the future, the 1.9 and 110 request approval to reject bids? Okay, and we'll also have opportunity for comments and discussion at the time of 1.8 and 1.9.
I have a question.
Yes.
With regard to, there were a lot of things thrown around between, I don't know, the last couple of months, and one of those things of recent was basically how, can you walk through a couple of timelines or a timeline of, if we do reject today, what is salvageable? What can we salvage? We're $2 million into this project. So what can we salvage and what kind of a timeline? If we would reject and we decide to do grass fields and get the team out of the wetlands, back home, look at priorities of, lights and, like a pitching sort of overhead building that they need. We could do this for much less. I mean, they build baseball fields at playgrounds for much, much cheaper. $7 million is a lot of money. But the last time Dr. Faley mentioned is we could do something, regroup, and not lose any time with it. I'm just speaking about the fields at the moment. Is that still on the table? I don't want to go into a blind vote and not have any kind of a plan of or general timeline of, hey, we should get together in a room at this point and regroup. I don't want to just put it on hold perpetually. I don't know how everyone else feels, but just, can you walk me through a potential timeline, what the conversations have been?
I guess I know I'd just echo Mr. Case's comment. If you're going to ask about the fields, I would ask the same question about the high school project as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we were getting there.
Might as well have them answer both at the same time, but I guess I kind of had the same question. I understand the recommendation is to reject the bids. My question is, what is the administration's next recommended step?
Sure. So I will start by kind of recapping a conversation that occurred last week with our architects and the team there. As from my perspective, they're the people that are able to advise us most accurately at this juncture. So we asked them a series of questions in a meeting that our team had and essentially wanted to get to some of those answers, Mr. Case, that you're asking here, these questions that you're asking. One of the questions would be, were you surprised at all with the bid numbers? When you opened them up on bid day, were you surprised by that? Their answer was yes. They thought they would be higher. So that was an interesting conversation with that team. They said in the past couple of months and even in the last couple of weeks, they have seen costs go up by as much as 35% in some materials in some markets. The inability to get products is a major concern for them. When we asked about a timeline, unfortunately, their answer to us was, right now, there's just no crystal ball. It is changing so quickly and rapidly that they don't have the answer. They did commit, however, to working with us. We're their client, and as you mentioned, we've contributed quite a bit of money and investment to this project. They've committed to continue to work with us through this process, and I think they would do it at the timeline that we set. I don't feel comfortable, and I would defer to Mr. Simcox. If we could give you a date right now, I think we could be prepared, to come back with a more realistic timeline. But the statement of, can we meet the timeline set? I don't think that that's in the conversation. The timeline would be delayed, for sure. We'd have to go through land development on some of these projects, depending on the changes. All of those things just take a considerable amount of time to shift the scope to that degree. So it will delay both projects. To rejecting the bids tonight will delay them.
So I'm sorry, maybe you don't have an answer, and that's perfectly fine, but when you say about, delay and shifting scope, would the recommendation be more delay for X number of months and revisit the whole project, or would the recommendation be look at a scaled down project?
I think our team would need some guidance from the board in regards to which of those options, or perhaps if we would do both of them parallel to each other. We could consider delaying and rebidding and maybe revisiting this on a quarterly basis. With that being the target and working with our teams, monitoring how things are going in the industry. And parallel to that, we could work on redesigning the scope. What that scope redesign would need to look like is a reduced amount of square footage in our construction project. It would look like a different set of surfaces, likely at the lower campus project, removing the turf, doing some of those things that add significant cost. In order for us to come in at a better price point, we're going to have to really dig into what's currently in the specs. They're not confident that just a rebid would produce lower prices.
So then this would further delay the Phase 2 as well. And is there a possibility of maybe integrating any aspects of the phase with Phase 1 if it's going to continue to delay subsequent phasing of construction?
Yeah, I think as a board, we have the opportunity to do whatever we deem is most appropriate for the community. So we could shift our priorities if that is what comes about from our conversations and feedback sessions we would have, because we do have a need. There is a growing need for enrollment in our elementary schools. So we did this work, and this work has been ongoing for the better part of 3 years. Perhaps it's time for us to come back together as a team and go through some of those exercises again. We really have full control, and Christine has worked with our financial team to make sure that we're protected from the money that we already have borrowed, and she has all the answers to those questions as presented at our last finance meeting.
Chris?
Yes, Mike.
I've got a question, and it is, in the past, I know that Richard said that administration supports this decision. And is this like a split decision, or is this a unanimous decision not to move forward?
Is your question from the district leadership team? Is our recommendation unanimous to you this evening?
Well, yeah, my question is, I want to make sure that I understand the term when it says administration supports this. Do we have buy-in from all the administrators, or is this just coming from one or two people?
No, this is a collective recommendation from our entire district leadership team. Through conversations, analysis of the budget, conversations with Crabtree, looking at the future and the impact potentially of this project on subsequent additional projects, we feel that this is the best recommendation as of April 2022.
Okay, thank you.
And one last question. With regard to the Phase 1 and the high school, if we would take the air conditioning out, the HVAC, and there was the other, the windows, that's $3.5 million, and then you take the fields off the table and maybe rebid as grass fields, we're very close to the original budget. Is that feasible? I mean, was that part of, it's a blanket recommendation to say refuse the bids, but, and we talk about, you can't rebid, say, the fields to grass because that was never part of the plan, but to take the field part off and rebid as grass, and then to take Phase 1 for the high school and take windows and AC out, and then put those just in your run rate annually to do those later, was that on the table at all and discussed? If you can elaborate on that.
Sure, I'll do the best that I can. So John would have to weigh in regarding, if that is something that the board could consider here as the agenda item comes up. Those are ad alternates, so those are additional components in addition to the base bid that we could select or reject independently. Those are specifically the $3 million for the HVAC project is something that I know Jeff and his team feel strongly needs to be done, whether it's part of the borrowing or it's funded through a different source. It is my understanding, and again, I'm looking to John to provide guidance here, that we could choose to award the base bid alone.
So yes, you can the bid is a 1,000, 2,000-page specification. Basically, you're getting a number on that specification. That is something you can't change. However, if you have ad alternates that are specifically lined up to be able to be accepted or rejected, you can accept the base bid without the ad alternates. I don't have the documents in front of me to know what all the ad alternates were. There were a number of ad alternates, but that's absolutely correct. But we can't rescope the project in this right now. We would need to, if we can accept the base bids, we can accept the base bids with some alternates, but we can't say to the contractors who have bid, wait, we're changing things, we're going to hold your bid. The bid is the bid. That's the offer and acceptance, and we would have to rebid it to be able to change the scope, unless it's just accepting the base bid.
The total odd alternates are up there now. Totals $4 million. I think one of the driving forces that led to our recommendation is the project's around 25% over budget. So our concern is, looking out a year from now, the only data we have to suggest maybe what a phase 2 would cost would be take what our current estimates are and multiply it times 1.25. So as you continue down this road of uncertainty, we're less sure how that would affect the potential for phase 2. That was a driving factor in a lot of the conversations that we had as a team. It's not so much phase 1 in isolation, it's more the totality of phase 1 and phase 2 over a given set of 3 to 4 years.
Are there any further questions? Okay. 1.7, Mr. Moravich, we had previously spoken the possibility of having to change an agenda item.
Yeah, so just complying with the Sunshine Law, because I know it was posted, and actually the board agenda item still reads this way. I'll read it as it should read. 8.2, which was Dr. Trickett's contract, should read that request to approve entering into an agreement with Dr. Christopher Trickett effective for a term of April 19th, 2022 through April 18th, 2027. So it's off by a day. Otherwise, Dr. Trickett would be resigning tonight and not have a job till tomorrow. So we're correcting that. The attachment that is attached is the correct attachment that has made that change and then made some other solicitor cleanup of language. So when the board is asked to vote on 8.2, the new agenda item will read with the new dates beginning with April 19th tonight, and we'll be agreeing to the contract that's attached with, as I said, has those changes. So again, in compliance with changing the agenda, I'd ask that the board vote on agreeing, not on the contract, but just on agreeing that the agenda item will be the amended agenda item that I just read.
And is that a possible voice vote?
I would do a roll call.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to agree to the change in language for 8.2 on the agenda.
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, Mr. Hart, second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin? Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Okay, 1.8, public participation on agenda items.
So I'll read the rules.
Yes, please. We have a list.
Rules of public participation at school board meetings pursuant to the Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy. The following are the rules of public participation. Individuals attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but is instead an opportunity to offer comments on matters that are or may come before the board. In particular, personnel or student matters may not be commented on, even if the employee, parent, or student is speaking because of confidentiality laws and rules. As it relates to questions, the superintendent may assign an administrator to speak to the speaker after the meeting to attempt to answer any questions raised by the speaker. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to individuals. Clapping, calling out, or cheering is not permitted, nor are conversations in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board table at any time. Individuals shall make their comments from the speaker's lectern. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Any person making any threats of violence may be removed from the meeting or cited by local police. The above expectations of this policy are set forth in Board Policy 903, which is on the district's website, embedded within Board Docs.
Thank you, Mr. Maravich. First, we have Jeffrey Bryan, auditorium renovation.
Thank you, everybody. Jeffrey Bryan, I live at 241 Atlantic Avenue. I'll give you a little bio. So I was born in Berks County. I attended Wilson K through 12. I graduated in 1979. While at Wilson, I was very involved in media. I was involved in theater sound. I went on to Ithaca University. I have earning a BS degree in communications with minors in business, computer science, and religion. Don't ask. I currently create and negotiate legal contracts for an over $1 billion a year high-tech firm. And when I was at Wilson, the high school auditorium needed updating. It was only about 20 years old at that point. The wooden stage was always in disrepair. The technology was outdated. The steel cables and steel rods that crisscross above the catwalk address a structural deficiency and keep the walls from falling outward, preventing the collapse of the roof. I moved back to Pennsylvania from the New York City metro area in '06, along with my wife Alba and our 3 daughters. Alex started at Central in 8th grade, Christina started in 1st grade at Green Valley, and Victoria in pre-K. All 3 were and are heavily involved in music, theater, and the arts. As a result, all of us have spent a significant amount of time in the auditorium, which sadly hasn't changed much from when I was at Wilson. The stage is still in disrepair. Many of the seats are either torn or broken, and the technology is still outdated. In 10th grade, when Alex was in theater and they were rehearsing a scene barefoot, she ended up with a 6-inch piece of the wooden stage wedged completely into her toe, into her foot rather, between the big toe and the index toe. 4-hour ER visit, 15 stitches. She stayed involved with Wilson Theater and Music. She was eventually president of Wilson Theater Company. After Wilson, she attended NYU, graduating with a BA in music business and a communications minor. Christina received several top awards in art competitions and is currently an art ed major at Kutztown. And Victoria still enjoys singing and performing, all thanks to the arts programs and teachers at Wilson. Many people are not aware of the extent to which the auditorium is utilized by both Wilson students and the communities. Activities held in the auditorium include school assemblies, choral, orchestra, and band concerts, theater productions, jazz fest events, dance recitals, pageants, fundraisers such as Wilson Iron Chef, Meet the Teacher Night parent assemblies, scholarship award ceremonies, community meetings, and so much more. Based on the hours of usage and the numbers of individuals involved, the auditorium is probably the single most utilized resource in the district. Doctors, plumbers, pastors, landscapers, lawyers, athletes, and almost everyone else are all consumers of the arts. Music, movies, TV, theater, communications, visual arts, fashion, graphic design. I have 15 seconds?
Please wrap up.
These became even more important when we were all stuck at home. Over 10 million Americans work directly in these fields, and if Wilson is to remain competitive, we need to update facilities, update tools, and update programs to achieve further success for our kids. Quick conclusion, there's a vast difference between higher taxes with little value in return versus investing in our children or in our community where everyone benefits by increased property values and most importantly, improved quality of life.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Next is Craig Stoneha, construction project.
So I do apologize, I didn't write anything down, so we're just going to wing it. Last gentleman made a lot of great points, he really did, and I'm not personally familiar with the auditorium situation, but I don't think at any point we're talking about abandoning the auditorium. We just may have to start looking at getting a little bit more economical in this project, not so much putting in a collegiate level facility, but maybe we do fix some of the issues that are going on. Maybe we look at a refresh instead of a complete rebuild. But there's some major problems with this project I think a lot of people have talked about, but I want to hit them one more time before you guys vote. 25% is a lot. Anybody that's ever run capital projects knows that I mean, that's a deal breaker right there. We haven't even signed paperwork. So we've got right off the bat, we're already fighting from behind. On top of that, at the last facilities meeting and the economics meeting, it was brought up by people involved with the project. There's almost no way we're going to be able to hit these timelines. You know, the idea that we'll do it over the summer, I think that ship has sailed. So projects that I'm involved in right now, we're looking at 6 months, 8 months, 12 months on a 2 to 3 month project from beginning to end. So everything is just so delayed, we are absolutely going to impact academics and scholastics at the high school for an entire year. There's almost no way around it at this point in this environment, at least now, like you said, April 2022. We're looking at an issue here with the finances, and I think the gentleman from Raymond James at the last meeting made a great point, which was that we're losing buying power with interest rate hikes, and that is legitimate. And I think his standpoint was borrow, borrow, borrow now while rates are low. But the other half, which I think I've heard from a few people in the administration, is that we can't just keep borrowing now. And as interest rates go up and our buying power goes down, being 25% over budget at this point might cost us future projects. And we do have future projects that need to be done, much more need-oriented than this one.
1 minute.
So, thank you. So, and then finally, you know, we got to look at priorities. I know I've said this before, and I know some of you have said it. You know, this is not a board that is not aware of everything that I'm saying. But you know, we've got to. Nobody saw this coming to this extent 2-3 years ago, and I know a lot of hours have been put in by everyone here. But you know, we can't shape the world the way we want just because we want it. At a certain point, we're going to need to buckle down and figure out what do we care most about, and start refocusing. Rejecting these bids doesn't mean we lose the $40 million. It doesn't mean we can't do great things for Wilson. It just means that maybe this project in this form may not be the best move. So that's all I've got. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for your comments. Lisa Marie Stoneha, expansion project.
All right. So about a year and a half ago, we bought the home that we're currently in, and one of the things that I was very excited about was to update our kitchen. I had taken on extra jobs, saved a ton of money, and I was really excited to do this. We started, we saved, we budgeted, we started getting contracts, bids out, and we were about ready to sign our contracts, and just like this week, it got cold. It got really cold, so we turned our heat on. And imagine our surprise that half of our heating system didn't work correctly. And we now had a decision to make of whether or not we were going to fix our heating system. Now, I could have said, suck it up, family, put on a jacket, mama needs a new kitchen. Okay? I could have gone to the bank and maxed out my line of credit. I could have gone back to my clients that said, I know that we had agreed on this price, but I have a heating issue now, so I've got to charge you more. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, we sucked it up, we fixed the heat, and we started saving again, and we used our perfectly functioning, yet ugly, kitchen. Okay? And that's what happens when you're an adult. And honestly, sometimes adulting just sucks. Now, I get it. Some of you are sitting here thinking, Lisa Marie, I don't really feel bad for you. A kitchen upgrade isn't a real world problem. And I agree, it is not. It's a want. It's not a need. You, my friends, would be exactly right for judging me that way, and I don't want you to feel bad for me. That's not the point of me telling you this. As I did what any responsible adult would do, I took care of my family's needs ahead of my wants. I'm still in an ugly kitchen, but we are warm, okay? And that's why we're here. Adulting sucks. Yes, many of these things in these bids are awesome, and it would be incredible for our kids to have. And as a gentleman spoke before, my husband, there's a lot of needs in here. And I don't know why, we didn't, things have changed, and I understand things change, and we need to go back, and we need to use our negotiating skills, and we need to figure out what are the needs, what can we do, and what should we do right now.
1 minute.
And I know that one of you is a very good negotiator because I helped design your training, so I'm sure you can do it. At this time, our community is in a really bad spot, and we keep hearing that this phase won't raise our taxes, but honestly, that's not a true statement. And it's a failure to look at the full picture. Here's why. We're maxing out our ability to borrow, which means if something major happens, heating, air conditioning, something like that, is an expense has occurred, we have not budgeted for it. And we have not budgeted for it. Our only option will be to raise the taxes on our residents. And we're putting ourselves in this position for a very long time.
I get it, adulting isn't fun, but it's our job to be a good, fiscally responsible citizen and a member of our community. We cannot leave this financial burden on our kids. We cannot leave them with no other option but raising taxes whenever they want to add on or they want to do something with the school. We should not be so quick to approve a debt that will impact our kids and grandkids for years to come. Please reject the bids. Go back to the drawing board. You're all creative. Put your minds together and come up with what takes care of our needs.
Thank you for your comments. Tammy Keener, 1.6.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Here we are again. I have a quick question, and I probably won't get an answer, and I understand, Mr. Case, that what I mimic what Lisa said, our needs to our wants. A need is an air conditioning system and new windows. That is a need. That will save on heating. That will keep our kids cool when they go to summer school. That's a need. An AstroTurf field is not a need. That's a want. Just so I can clarify that, please. So I'll start my speech now. On September 4th of 2014, I stood right here, and I have been pleading with you ever since, all these years, to not raise our taxes again. We can't afford any more. Since then, every year you have managed to raise our taxes, with the exception of 1 year, mine went down 1 penny. Woo! There are over 12,000 people who are losing their homes to school property tax every single year in the state of Pennsylvania. And I'm not just stating senior citizens. I mean couples without children. I mean single people that want to own their home instead of rent. You can't rent a home, you can't rent a place without the property tax being passed off by the landlord. That's a fact. School property tax is one of the most barbaric taxes there is, where they take your home long after you've paid it off due to the fact that you can't afford these taxes anymore. This is horrible. I am a disabled veteran. I live on a fixed income. I have worked extremely hard to own my home. When I first bought my home, my school property tax, in 1986, my school property tax was a mere $800 a year. I have a very small home, not a big one. You all know where I live. I'm sure you've seen it. Now I'm paying well over $4,000, and I never had a child in this district. As a stakeholder, as a Christian, wife, mother, and a veteran of the United States Army, I am on the edge of losing my home, not my long-term investment that I have invested in. I never once filed for bankruptcy, although I could have. I don't do that. I pay my taxes, and I clearly live off a very tight budget. Half my disability check has to go away for these barbaric taxes. How many of you have filed bankruptcy so you didn't have to pay property taxes? I've done a little research, trust me. There's more than one of you that's done that. You can't handle the finances, yet you expect to keep spending our money. Perhaps everyone in the district should file bankruptcy to avoid paying their taxes this year. I have covered the state over the past 20 years, driving down property taxes. I heard horror stories. People can't afford this anymore, the foolish spending. Even spoke to a woman who has turned to eating cat food, and has 3 coats on her to keep her mere mobile home that sits on a tiny block. She cried so hard to me and begged me to eliminate this tax and get rid of it. I heard many other horror stories too. We need to scale back the wish list you have created. There is no way that with an almost 50-year high inflation, supply chain shortage, and now we're headed for what could be one of the worst recessions in history.
Can you wrap up, please?
Stop wasting our money, stop the foolish wish list. Please do not send this project for bid or reject these bids. We need to rethink how many people are going to lose their homes because of your wish list. You may not even know, but you will probably even putting some of those homeless kids out of the home. I also had one other question.
Ms. Keener, you actually went beyond the buzzer time.
So did that gentleman.
And yes, and we didn't give him 5 extra minutes.
I want to know if the cafeteria
shoes, the steamer, all of this. You spent 3% of the first bond.
We're up to about 6 minutes, Ms. Keener. We were,
No, we're not up to 6.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments. Mr. Gary W. Rogers, high school renovation.
Good evening. My name is Gary Rogers. I'm a taxpayer and grandfather of Wilson students. I'd like to speak in favor of rejecting all the bids for both the high school renovation and expansion projects as well as the high school sports field project. Now is not the time to undertake any project unless it's an emergency repair. Inflation as measured by CPI is at its 40-year high, and the new PPI number came out last week at 11%, which will trickle down to the CPI and make it the highest CPI in history. We have already seen that high inflation means high prices for building supplies, materials, and supply chain issues. Also, as you know, labor costs, which normally run approximately 35% of total project costs, is also at historic levels. Now, the unsophisticated decision maker would say, let's build now before costs go any higher. But the more informed decision maker would understand the following. Our economy cannot handle this level of inflation for very long, and the antidote to inflation is always a recession. What happens in a recession? Demand for goods and services go down, and as a result, prices for those goods and services also go down. So you get more for less. What about the prevailing wage costs? Well, several of you asked the question of some of your consultants who have told you that the prevailing wage costs never go down. Well, coming from someone with an extensive background in wage and salary, I'm here to tell you that the prevailing wage costs do go down like material costs. And if any of those consultants would have taken the time like I did to do a research project on the prevailing wage for Berks County educational projects from 2005 to 2021, they would have discovered that 1/3 of the time, the annual prevailing wage adjustment was 0 to -3%. And when do you think these negative adjustments occurred?
1 minute.
If you guessed following a recession, you would be correct. So recessions solve material costs and availability problems, as well as labor costs and availability problems. So when is the best time for a construction project? If you guessed following a recession, you would be correct. Building after recession would give you more project for less money. So I'm urging you to be sophisticated decision makers and reject all bids for both the high school renovation and expansion project as well as the high school sports field project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Rogers. Jolene Stankiewicz, rebuilding remodel bid.
Good evening and thank you. I come tonight to talk about the building project. As an alumni of Wilson, I was in color guard, marching band, and chorus, so I used facilities that need updating. I do not disagree that they need updated, definitely needs updated. Though, do we really need an elaborate black box, millions of dollars spent on that? I have a friend who's associated with Yoakum, that's right down the street. They have one of these theaters and they do not use it, as much as they really thought they would use it. So also with that, she also mentioned that Wilson, that would be available for Wilson to rent, saving us, thousands, tons of, I don't know exactly numbers, but, lots of money for our school district. I do agree that we need to connect lower house and upper house together for the safety of our students, and also, check into different ideas with the fields. So it's not a total, thing that I would say no to, but it definitely needs to be looked into. So I just asked the board to check into that. I also, want to touch on the overcrowding of the schools. None of this is going to support our curriculum, our students, things like that. So I do agree, I love the arts, and, as Wilson, I was here and participated in that, though it definitely needs to be changed and relooked at. And I just asked the board to, look into their bids. Do not pass them tonight and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next is Dwight Wegman, Phase 1 capital expansion.
Good evening, everybody.
Many community members and I have expressed their objections to this proposed capital expansion over the past few months, and compelling arguments have been made identifying all of the problems with the proposal. I don't believe I can really add anything new tonight because most everything has already been said. But I do want to focus on a couple of areas for consideration that I believe every board member needs to process before voting to move forward with the expansion. First, we are led to believe that the community is for this expansion. Up until a few moments ago, I hadn't heard one person get before this board to advocate for this expansion. However, we have heard many speeches expressing objections to the project. So is the community support really there as we've been told? There's little evidence to say the community is really for this project, but plenty of tangible evidence that says the community is against it. Second, all of you board members live in this community. So you see the community wherever you go, the grocery store, practices, ball games, at the pool, at church, or just gathering with neighbors and friends. Your decision to move forward on this project is not an abstract one. It is real and it has significant impact and consequences to everyone you meet. How will you look people in the eye and tell them that an unconstrained project that is already 25% over budget in this inflationary environment is a good decision? Many parents and residents are having difficulty putting gas in their cars or paying for their groceries. I believe we are all experiencing sticker shock in a variety of areas. Do we really want to add more sticker shock to the residents of this district?
1 minute.
I don't believe you do. The consequences of a vote to move forward with this project will reverberate for years in the district through increased taxes and debt service that will constrain the board from taking actions that are truly needed. There are two motions on the agenda tonight to reject the bids. I strongly agree with these motions and recommend the bids be rejected. If you vote to reject the bids, the community will thank you for using good judgment and making a wise decision. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Val Delp, high school and field bids.
Good evening. So in my line of work, I deal with numbers and investments all day long. So I've done a really deep dive into a lot of the information presented tonight and last week. So some of this is going to be repeat. I apologize. So we learned that the bids for the high school project came back 25% over estimates and 15% over the secured bond. And the field project came back 37% over estimates and 25% over the bond. And again, also those bids only included some of those alternates. So really, if you would have added all of those alternates into the totals, those percentages are much higher. We also know that we would need to secure at least another 7 to 10 million in order to cover the amount we are underfunded. The Fed is in the process of raising rates over the next year, which ultimately means the interest rates for borrowing will go up as well. You currently have bonds secured at likely one of the lowest interest rates you'll ever get at this point. Borrowing more now will be at a higher rate, and restructuring will also potentially increase the rates with an estimated almost $500,000 more in interest costs to the district. I understand we have the ability to further restructure the debt out to another, say, 30 years to try and keep the annual repayment costs down. But the effect is a significant increase to the amount of overall interest the district would pay over time. Could potentially put more stress on the general budget, especially if certain grant money streams are discontinued. And then we saw last week that the 2022-2023 general budget deficit to cover from the committed fund balance is already projected to be 5.5 million, and that's 2.5 million over this school year's originally estimated deficit. Now we haven't even gotten to the cost of buying additional land, building a new elementary school, staffing a whole new school, renovations to Severn, and the teacher's contract up for renewal.
1 minute.
Lastly, the school tax increase last year was 5.3%, and now we see the max recommended to be approved for this year is 4.2%. And that increase is projected to only generate an estimated 2.9 million more in tax revenue, but that still leaves the general budget at deficit. I think if you move forward with this project as it is, you're going to kind of put yourself into a corner and have no choice but to raise the taxes. So all I'm asking is that don't only think of this as checking a box on your list of achievements while serving on the board. Please really consider the long-term ramifications of doing these projects as they are right now. Also consider the community members you could be hurting if you move forward as they are laid out and taxes are raised. The low-income families, the senior citizens living off of Social Security income, the middle-class families who are making ends meet and now have to cut corners. Please vote to reject the bids and revise the plans. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Tony D. Girolamo? Vote. Yeah, well, not handwriting sometimes, but vote to reject bids on agenda.
Vote to reject bids, yes. Well, I'll try not to duplicate what some of the people have said before, but, okay, we're voting on $50 million tonight, which is part of a larger project. This is phase one. You got phase 2 and 3, which is the elementary school, new elementary school for $27 million, and the Wilson Southern Edition also, which is going to come out to like $100 million by the time you're all done. And I don't think you can really consider $50 million without considering $100 million and what the whole effect is, and the priorities, which some people have said within those things. What's more important? The classrooms at the middle school, you know, the auditorium, the air conditioning that just Mr. Simcox needs. So that's the thing I suggest. And also, we had that Finance Committee meeting last week, which I attended, and as I look through that, we were talking about 4 years with an average tax increase of 5% under the current Act 1, which, you know, can change if you get an 8.5% teacher's contract, obviously, in the wages. And that goes on for 5 years at a 25% increase in property taxes. It's already sitting out there in front of us, and I'm not sure what all's in that, but I'm sure that a lot of this is. The expenses are going to exceed revenues after this year, after this budget period, by $5 million a year. $20.7 million will be reducing the school's reserves over the next 4 years. The district's bond debt was increased by $45 million recently, which was double what the bond debt was before. And now you'd have to take it up another $10 million for just to hit phase 1, plus another 40 or 50 million to get where you need to be with all the projects. So you're more than doubling your debt. You're also doubling the time it takes to pay it, more than doubling. You were at 2027 to pay off your debt. Now you're at 2033 with the $45 million you just borrowed, and the next set you're going to be at 2042. So would you, if it was your money board, would you extend, if you wanted to put a nice addition onto your house, I ask you to think about, would you double your mortgage and double the time it takes to pay it off to do it? I don't think so.
1 minute.
Okay. On the current project, I think people have said enough already about that. Current bids are 27% higher. We all understand supply chain and labor costs are skyrocketing. You can't even get supplies. You can't get tools, delays, projects, higher cost. That when that nice recession, which we don't really want to see, but we raise interest rates and inflation itself brings back that recession, and that's the cure for it, that it'll be a much better time to spend the money. So I urge the board to follow through and do what the administration is recommending and reject the bids tonight, and reevaluate the priorities and think about what we really need to spend on and when.
Thank you for your comments. And last, we have Chastity Santiago Construction Project.
All right. So I always start out with a quote, so let's go. If names be not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language be not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. This idea is very important. It's the idea that the first order of new leaders is to rectify names. That's to make sure that things are called what they're supposed to be called. So it's funny how it's not your truth until it's your truth. There have been many community members who have come up here to express the same concerns night after night, week after week, to just fall on deaf ears, but I'm glad to see the administration is seeing it as well. I'm disheartened, though, to find or to hear that the first questions coming are about sports fields and not about air conditioning or windows or the needs of our students. And then last board meeting, we get a word salad about some type of tax thing, throwing out defensive statements. The project's not going to increase your taxes. $45 million bond, it's our money. No, it's not your money, it's our children's money, okay? I know that honesty is in short supply in contemporary politics, but our school leaders should be better than this. If you wanted to be transparent, you would have not talked at all, or you would have explained what the bonds are, a form of debt, instead of going down the river you went and talking about and referring to our seniors as turnover because Whitfield's enrollment is increasing. How dare you? I'm just floored by that one. You know, all you've done is erode the trust between the community and this school district, plain and simple. If the district didn't issue new bonds after paying off the existing ones, our tax bill would go down. But you know what? That wouldn't be a tax increase to you guys. It is to everybody out here. So the majority of this construction project is nothing more than a solution in need of problems. The kids don't need a state-of-the-art entrance or a cafeteria. I've watched my son drop a Dorito on the floor, look at me, look at the Dorito, pick it up and eat it. So I'm pretty sure, and I'm not the only one that has that kind of story, I'm sure. But, you know, there's so many real and compelling problems that need solutions. We should focus our attention and resources on those. As a global vice president of operations and workforce management, I can tell you, continuing down this path of creating solutions without problems is like shooting at a ghost. You don't hurt the ghost, but you wreak havoc on anyone or anything in your line of fire.
Thank you for your comments. We'll move on to 1.9, request approval to reject all bids for the high school renovation and additions project. Looking for a motion for 1.9.
Negrini, so moved.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have any comments? Mr. Schneider? Oh, sorry, Mr. Negrini.
That's okay.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, after you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Well, I do agree with many of the speakers here tonight about the need to reject this at this time. As someone who works in education, I know the difference between an American education system and what you have in Europe and other places. Here, we have an education system that does more than teach us to read and write and do math. It teaches things, and there is curriculum for drama. There is for the musical arts. We're sitting in an art gallery currently. So while I do agree it is time to pause, I do disagree somewhat about what people believe are needs and wants, and I think we just need to wait and revisit this issue a little down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Mr. Negrini.
Thank you. First and foremost, we can debate how public education is funded, and perhaps in the future in Pennsylvania that may change, as we know that there is a lawsuit that is being litigated regarding the constitutionality of our funding system. Certainly in terms of property taxes and the burden that is placed on the local taxpayer when it comes to our budget, it is significant, and I personally wish that Pennsylvania and our federal government, in putting in place the mandates that is required to provide quality education to our students, would change, and they would step up and contribute to the education of our children and the future of this country, but they don't. And so until that occurs, this is the system upon which that our education system is paid for. I take my responsibility seriously in terms of being a good steward with taxpayer money. I was appointed to serve this community in August of 2010. The first budget that I was involved with in the 11-12 school year came on the tail end of our last major construction project. at which time we passed a budget that was a 6.2% increase over the prior year. Since that time, I believe, based upon the record of our tax increases, that the board that I have served on have been good stewards of our taxpayers' money. Over the course of the 2012-13 through 2018-19 budgets, we've seen annual increases less than 2%. We see monthly payments increasing on average homes in the districts. That's an average assessment of $4 a month, $389 a month, $287 a month, $4.04 a month, $4.05 a month, $3.92 a month, and $4.40 per month up until the 18-19 school year. And of course, we passed a 0% tax increase during the pandemic. For 75th percentile of home assessments over the course of that period of time, the highest monthly increase, $5.22, the lowest being $3.36. So again, I recognize that every individual that lives in this district has different financial situation. My parents are retired. They're on a fixed income. They still live in the same modest home that they moved into back in the late 70s in Cornwall Terrace. Many of the neighbors that I grew up with still live on that same street, still on fixed incomes. I recognize that not everybody in this district has children going to Wilson. And so that has to be balanced with what we have to provide and what we should provide and what we don't need to provide year in and year out with a budget. I'm going to vote tonight to reject the bids, and I encourage the rest of the board to do so, to be good stewards of taxpayer money. But that doesn't end the discussion or debate about the merits of these projects and other projects that will need to be addressed in the near future and over the course of time. The Wilson School District is not going anywhere. And there are people that continue to come back to this community long after they have graduated because of the culture of this district and the value that people see in buying a home in our community. And I've done the same after graduating from Wilson, coming back into this community, and have attempted to make the district a better place than it was when I left. I do believe that we need to put our collectives' minds together to find ways to address the high school issues, the auditorium issues. In 1997, the current gymnasium was renovated and put on the forefront when at that time that board legitimately discussed and debated an auditorium project of similar scope to what we're looking at right now. 1997. And that has not been addressed since then. And we've had further discussions and debates on that in the years since then. And I remember coming onto the board early on and walking through every building with Larry Bortz to figure out what our needs were and improvements that needed to be done in each of our buildings. I remember going backstage with Mike Martin during that time that we were both serving on the Facilities Committee and dealing with some of those weights that help raise and lower the curtains and concerns for the safety and well-being of our students. It is long overdue that we demonstrate a commitment to the arts and music program that we have also committed through the years to our sports program. So that being said, I am encouraging administration, the board, our community to discuss with one another a way to achieve the needs that are long overdue and that are necessary for this district, while at the same time leaving ourselves in a position to address other future needs that will not go away. Increased enrollment, certainly renovations that need to take place at other buildings. I stand secure in my belief and the position of this district that we have never, during my time on here, sacrificed quality education, that we have sacrificed programs that have caused people from all over Berks County, southeastern Pennsylvania, and elsewhere to come to the Wilson School District because of what we provide both in the classroom and outside involving extracurriculars. And we need to continue to do that and be mindful and to not simply say we're not going to move forward with certain projects because there are costs associated with those projects. We know that the only way to realistically say that taxes will never go up is to either change the funding system, the way public education is addressed, or cutting program after program after program here at Wilson. And I, for one, will never commit to doing such a thing in terms of cutting programs. So let's continue to be fiscally responsible, but commit to continuing the improvement that has always made Wilson a place that people aspire to come to and have their children educated, and that has resulted in property value year in and year out increasing in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Any further comments for 1.9?
Other than well said, Jay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes?
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
1.10, request approval to reject all bids for the high school fields project. Looking for a motion for 1.10.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Any comments? Okay, we have a first and we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
1.11, request to accept the resignation of Dr. Richard Fadley, Superintendent of Schools, effective June 30th, 2022. Dr. Fadley and the board agree that his accumulated sick days shall be converted to vacation days and shall be surrendered in consideration of him transferring to an employment consulting role. Dr. Fadley shall continue employment with the district in an employed consulting role and receive his salary, benefits, and 403B contributions through June 30th, 2022. Looking for a motion for 1.11.
So moved, case?
Mr. Case first, and Mr. Hart second. Any conversation or comments?
Yes, this is Mike. Well, I believe that this is in the best interest of the school as well as the students. I do have an issue with how this is put together from my viewpoint of ethics, and I will have to vote no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other comments? Dr. Kennedy?
I would like to thank Dr. Faley for her service for the past 5 years in this district. It took some nudging, but he did oversee a complete overhaul in the culture of this district, which facilitated a positive change, which started with the administration, worked down to the teachers and the staff, and we do have a long way to go yet. But I want to recognize that he did start that, and he picked this fabulous administration team, which I'm very, very proud of, and I couldn't ask for a better one. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Any other comments?
I would just like to echo what Dr. Kennedy said, and being a superintendent of any school district during a pandemic is in no way an easy job. So I just want to thank Dr. Faley for his 5 years with the district and everything that we come through during his time.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Okay. Hearing no other comments, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
That's 8 yes, 1 no.
1.12, request to approve the appointment of Dr. Christopher Trickett to the role of interim superintendent of schools effective immediately. Looking for a motion for 1.12. Dr. Kennedy?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments? Okay, I will just give Dr. Trickett my vote of confidence, and I think we're in good hands from now and the next, I have an update on our search, but from now until, we have a new permanent superintendent, we look forward to working with you. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
113, update presentation on right sizing.
Thank you, Mrs. Cocker. Just want to thank the board for entrusting this great responsibility with me. I'm very much committed to this organization, to the kids and the community, and looking forward to helping lead the organization until we find a permanent superintendent. So I have the responsibility and the opportunity tonight to talk a little bit about an update with the right sizing. And as the community is aware, I just want to recap a little bit of where we've been. So Ryan, if you can slide through here. Bringing back to the attention of everyone tonight, the current enrollment and looking forward beyond this school year specifically, out into the future, 2, 3, 4, and possibly even 5 years. We realized that there was this wave of children coming into our schools, and we've monitored this data over the last 3 years. This chart that you see was presented to the community previously. It just shows a current snapshot based on the date that it was pulled in our school buildings. Remember that 540 students is kind of that occupancy that we're looking for in an elementary school building based on the number of classrooms, based on all of the different spaces within our school. 540 is the target. This chart just kind of looks out into the future, into the year 2025, and we're using some projection data. Again, this data is coming together from work that we do with a third party that helps us look at all different data points locally, looking at census data, looking at trends over time, looking at kids in our school district currently that are 3 years old, 4 years old, looking at growth patterns, looking at developments that are being built, looking at turnover of current communities. And that's where we get those numbers in the projected 2025 column. When you look at those numbers, it is very clear that the majority of our schools are well above that number. So in order for us as an organization and a school district to buy some time in looking at and planning for phase 2, we're proposing to right-size or balance out our school system so that we can get closer to the numbers in the far right-hand column. So there are a lot of benefits to doing this and doing this now at this point in time. Obviously, we will be able to reduce the enrollment in some certain schools that are growing at a very high rate. Specifically, Whitfield, as we know, is very much over capacity. Green Valley is growing at the highest percentage of our 5 schools, and there are some major concerns. We're getting to the tipping point within those schools where the program will be affected by having the large number of students in each grade in each class. So again, it provides a longer-term solution for us and allows us some time to build the general fund budget in order to consider other options as we move forward. So where we are today, we did do a round of community feedback, and Mrs. Troutman put together some themes from that thought exchange that occurred recently. And themes that you see before you are the themes that came from our community, the people that filled out the thoughts and created thoughts and then went in and did the subsequent work with those. Class sizes are a high priority. Remember, these are our youngest learners. These kiddos are 5 years old, some of them, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. So class sizes are and should be a priority. Allowing rising 5th graders and their families to have some choice, that's a priority. Our families are concerned about that. How will that affect my 5th grade student, my rising 5th grader, my current 4th grader? So that's a piece of feedback that we've heard very clearly, and we're going to make sure that our plan that we present on May 2nd considers. Looking at knowing that this is coming, knowing that there will be some children that are going to need to shift schools, having transitional activities for kids at all of these environments, beginning immediately in the month of May and extending out into the summer is a critical piece. Our parents want that. Our students need that. So our teachers, our counselors, our principals will be actively involved in developing those plans, and those plans will be presented to you in the coming weeks. There was also, the final 2 pieces are kind of similar, keeping neighborhoods together. Obviously, that is a goal of any plan where we're trying to look at how we send kids to neighborhood schools. It's a challenging goal sometimes. Sometimes neighborhoods are large. Sometimes there's natural dividing lines that need to be considered. But this is a priority, and this is the priority that we're using as we're analyzing the options. And then proximity to home. That also came up throughout a theme, throughout our piece, looking at all of the different pieces that come into play when you're busing kids or having parents transport kids over longer distances. So here's the status update for the community and for the board. We have reviewed 5 options that have been developed with our full team, as well as a consultant that we're using. This consultant is from the company that we use, our transportation system is supported by. So that person has been working very closely with Randy Williams and our entire team to analyze a variety of different options that meet the goals established by our team. We are now refined to 2 different options, and we are analyzing the community feedback to make sure that we're taking all of those perspectives into account as we provide our final option to the board for their consideration. Some things that we're currently doing this week and likely into early next week is considering the impacts. Any change has ripples. Sometimes the ripples are hard to see, sometimes they're farther out. So we're doing our best to ensure that we're considering all those ripples before we bring forth a final recommendation. Some of the things that we're looking at right now is transportation impacts and effect on transportation, staffing. It's not as simple as just moving so many children from one school to another. There are implications on staffing. There's implications on class sizes. And obviously, there's emotional implications and real concerns from our families. So we want to make sure we're considering all of those options. We also want to present to you this evening where we are to give you a general idea of how many families we're currently looking at in these options. So the options that are being considered range anywhere between 7 and 17% of students being impacted when you look at our current elementary school kiddos. So that's where we are to give you a general sense of how many students we're talking about on a percentage basis. We're not prepared today to give you an exact number, more just a range in percentages. So our next steps, over the next week, we will be working diligently and committing a tremendous amount of effort and time into making sure that we understand the advantages and disadvantages of each one of the options. we'll be making sure that we are ready to provide a final recommendation for the board to consider on May 2nd. From there, obviously, making sure that have a strong communication strategy in place to make sure that immediately thereafter, the families are notified. So that work will be done leading up to the board vote, and then can just be modified from that decision. And then from there, after the communication, the focus will be on engagement strategies to make sure that our children and their families feel welcomed and like a valuable member of the school community that they will be joining. So that's my update to the board and to the community tonight. You can expect an additional update at our next board meeting, along with a recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett.
You're welcome.
114, presentation of superintendent search and timeline, and that's me. So the board has on the agenda to approve a superintendent search plan presented by the BCIU. They would take care of all of the search for a superintendent, interview process, kind of behind-the-scenes work at zero cost to the district, aside from any sort of advertising that they would have to do. And the timeline would be that they would advertise the position tomorrow afternoon, and then we would have interview processes, and it's relatively expedited that we would possibly appoint the new superintendent on June 6th. This is to keep in mind the school year. It would be nice to have our new superintendent in place to start planning for next school year. So the hope is that the start date for the new superintendent would be July 1st. That would depend on the possibility if that individual has a current contract with a different school district, they might have to have a different release date. But the hope is that we would have a new superintendent in position by July 1st to start summer work with the administration team and start the next school year. So that's our current update. We'll have communication coming out from the district. We will also have a community survey online to see what kind of qualities the community is looking for in a new superintendent, what their top priorities are for the next 5 years moving forward, and just to make sure that we're taking into consideration the community's input in this relatively big job of searching for our next superintendent. So that's my update, and we will update the community as we move along in the process. 115, we would looking for a motion to approve the agreement with the BCIU for a superintendent search service, with the IU charging no fee, but the district being responsible for any third-party expenses such as advertising. So looking for a motion for 115.
Schneider, excuse me, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have a second?
Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Any comments? Mr. Negrini.
Thank you. First and foremost, I respect Dr. Jill Hackman. We have used her in the BCIU in the past for a prior superintendent search. I think her team does an excellent job. We've also utilized the Chester County IU in the past for superintendent searches, so it's not uncommon for IUs to assist a school district with this very important decision. That being said, this indicates no disrespect to Dr. Hackman or her team, but in 1 out of every 4 vacancy for a superintendent during her career, both in the IU and in public education, school districts have made a decision to hire and promote from within. We have made a decision tonight to make Dr. Trickett interim superintendent. I believe that interim moniker should be removed as soon as possible. I do believe that Dr. Trickett would serve this community well in a permanent superintendent position, and therefore I find it unnecessary at this point to move forward with such an agreement with the IU. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Negrini. Any other comments from the board? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
No.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
No.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's 7 yes and 2 no.
116, the board met multiple times, so I'm just going to relay the dates. For executive session on April 4th, following our regular scheduled meeting, on April 18th in the evening, and prior to tonight's meeting, all to discuss personnel issues. 2.1, looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on April 4th, 2022, as attached. Do we have a motion for 2.1?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Do we have a second?
Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Any comments? Okay. Roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry, voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 3.1, request to approve the treasurer's report. Mr. Martin?
Yes, Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight the various treasury reports, the investment reports, the general fund and capital fund financial reports as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Negrini, second.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes,
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Payment of bills, Mr. Negrini.
Make a motion to approve the payment of bills from the following: the general fund, $3,281,021.73. From capital reserve, $7,833.50. From the 2019A construction fund, $7,480.79. And from the 2021C construction fund, $184,191.45.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. We have a motion for 4.1. Do we have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Abstain.
Mrs. Casper?
Abstain.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
yes,
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 2 abstain.
Financial reports, Mr. Negrini.
We submit for approval the following financial reports for the month of March 2022. The cafeteria and childcare and the activity accounts from Southern Middle School, Wilson West Middle School, and the senior high school as attached.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider? Yes. Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
yes,
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Trickett.
Thank you, President Cocker. Tonight I submit for the board's consideration the personnel and program recommendations. Inclusive in that list is 2 retirees. Randy Goldberg, our special education administrative assistant, has served the school district for 14 years, and Marlene Sell, a school bus driver, has worked for the school district driving children for the last 11 years. And then also, if you take your attention to 6.7, I'd like to introduce to you Jackie Reamer, who's over here, very patiently waiting to join our team as a high school certified school nurse. So we're very thankful to have you join the Bulldog community. I would like to welcome you and wish you the best as you transition.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Do we have a motion for, looking for a motion to approve superintendent's items 6.1 through 6.9 as presented?
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, second, Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes?
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
7.1, request to accept with gratitude the donations from the Giant Company through its Feeding School Kids initiative, a check in the amount of $9,386.47 to our Food Services Department to be used towards replacing kitchen equipment and student wellness events. And from Craig and Lisa Marie Stonehaw, 5 sets, 12 books each, of the Tuttle Twins books by Connor Boyack. Looking for a motion for 7.1.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Hart. Second
Martin.
case?
Mr. Hart, thank you. Roll call, or any discussion? Okay, this is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Human Resources, 8.1, request to accept the resignation of Dr. Chris Trickett, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary, under his 2009 agreement to enter into a new agreement as set forth. And this is what the discussion, the dates. At 8.2, request to approve entering into an agreement with Dr. Christopher Trickett effective for a term of April 20th, 2022 through April 19th. So I'll read.
Be April 19th.
Right.
It'll be tonight.
Right, April 19th, 2022 through April 19th, 2027 for the position of Assistant Superintendent of Secondary.
Sorry, April 18th. It can't be more than 5 years, so. So it's April 19th, 2022 through April 18th, 2027.
Okay. And again, the attachment has the correct wording, it's just that our actual agenda item was not changed in time. Looking for a motion for 8.1 and 8.2.
I'm sorry, are we voting on those separately?
Mr.
We
Maravich,
can
do we-
combine them?
I mean, you can combine them, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, looking for a motion to approve 8.1 and 8.2. Dr. Kennedy?
Hart.
Mr. Hart, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
9.1, request permission to ratify the contract with Conrad Weiser Decision Schools for 2 special education students for the 2021-2022 school year at a cost of $232.04 per student per day, beginning 8/5/21 and ending 6/3/2022. 9.2, request approval for membership into the BCIU's Berks County Safety and Security Consortium for the 22-23 school year. The annual fee for membership is $5,000. Title IV funds will be used to pay the membership fee. Looking for a motion to approve student services agenda items 9.1 and 9.2 as presented. Dr. Kennedy, do we have a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
10.1, request to approve to enter into a 60-month lease with Dell Financial Services for technology and engineering computers at an annual cost of $56,676.77 as attached. 10.2, request approval of a service agreement with District Management Group to provide strategic support and consultation in analyzing current use student schedules for all secondary buildings pending solicitor review and approval. Looking for a motion to approve technology and media agenda items 10.1 and 10.2 as presented.
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have a second?
McCray?
Mr. McCray, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Operations, 11.1, request approval to contract with International Fireworks Company, 242 Sycamore Drive, Douglasville, for graduation at a cost of $9,000 as recommended by the graduation committee, pending solicitor review and approval. Looking for a motion for 11.1.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Any discussion?
I'm looking forward to seeing those fireworks.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, 12.1, request approval of the 2022-23 rates for behind-the-wheel driver education, $380 for 6 hours of training, includes license test, $65 for additional 60-minute training as needed, $50 no-show fee. 12.2, request approval of the budget transfers dated March 16th, 2022 through April 12th, 2022 as attached. Looking for a motion to approve Finance Agenda Items 12.1 and 12.2 as presented.
McCray?
Mr. McCray, thank you. Do we have a
Negrini, second.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Any discussion?
Mrs. Cucker?
Yes.
There was discussion about this at our finance meeting on April 12th. I think there was some good feedback. Mr. Martin had indicated that perhaps this should be a service that we provide without a cost to our students and the families, given the safety that our students, their families, and the community. The change in rate does reflect the fact that this has not gone up in costs to our students over the course of the last few years, and it is actually in line slightly less than what a number of private entities do charge for this service. There was discussion about in the 23-24 rate going up again. We said we would kind of put that on hold to see where things play out with the number of students that enroll in this service as opposed to private entities. But that's the reason for this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. And as a former Wilson student who had the advantage of doing the behind-the-wheel class, I believe there is also an insurance incentive for families. If a student completes that program, that the family insurance is reduced. I don't know what the value would be, and I'm sure it depends on your insurance, but it's definitely a benefit for students to participate in this program.
Yeah, and if someone wants to talk to me after the meeting and tell me how I can do this, we have a 16-year-old in the house.
Any other further conversation? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Policies, 13.1, final reading and adoption of policies as presented. Objectives, 602, budget planning, 603, budget preparation, 604, budget adoption, 605, tax levy, and 606, tax collection. Looking for a motion for 13.1.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
McCray?
Mr. McCray, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
14.1 is our enrollment report, which is, as of April 12th, 2022, 6,348 students, which is an increase of 8 students from the previous report on March 17th. On to committee reports. The BCTC, Mrs. Casper.
No report. Our next meeting is April 27th.
Okay, thank you. And Student Services, Mrs. Casper.
Yes, so we met on April 6th in the admin building here
at 4. And we discussed just a couple items, mental health and counseling. We established a new partnership with the Cook Center for Human Connection, and we are promoting our mental health night, as well as other resources that are available around mental health for our community. Communication went out earlier this month regarding some of those resources that are available to the district. We're also working on a grant to pay for additional resources, particularly personalized services for anyone who needs it within the district. The Cook Center also offers professional development for a larger group on mental health first aid, and hopefully we'll be extending those services also to district staff. We also discussed Policy 819, Suicide Prevention Awareness and Response, which we haven't really visited or updated for a really long time. I believe it was like 2015 was the last time we had updated it, but we did get some recommendations from PSBA, and we'll be making some updates based on their suggestions. We also canceled our Equity Council meeting this past month, and for, I believe it was the 12th, and then all of those agenda items will be moved to our May 10th meeting. So we'll continue to review the data from our previous meeting, which was incredibly productive, and formulate some questions for the next step, which hopefully will be surveys and focus groups. So that's my report. Our next meeting is May 4th at 4.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. BCIU, Dr. Kennedy.
Neither the BCIU nor the Curriculum Committee has met since our last meeting. The BCIU is having a big 50th anniversary press event and different things going on this Thursday.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Berks EIT, Mrs. Schlossman. Thank you. Extracurricular Committee, I have no report either. Our last meeting was canceled. Facilities Committee, Mr. Case.
I think enough has been said tonight, so no report other than the next meeting is in June, currently June 13th. That might be too far along. Maybe we can get something on the calendar for May, depending on how our conversations go. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Case. Finance Committee, Mr. Negrini.
Thank you. We discussed at our last Finance Committee meeting on April 12th the year-to-date financial review and projections. Food Services provided a review. The RFP for the lock boxes came back. We only had 2 local banks, 2 Berks County banks that's responded to the RFP. Neither of those particular banks provided exactly what we were looking for, which would include walk-ins for our taxpayers to pay the per capita tax and to stamp a receipt, and one of which would be charging higher fees for the services that Fulton currently provides. We were going to engage in discussion with one of those banks whether or not some modifications could be done, but we made some obviously due diligent efforts to try to provide better user services for our taxpayers that want to go in to Fulton Bank, get a stamp receipt, to which many banks aren't doing currently. We received 6 responses for the RFP for district-wide photography services. A committee is going to interview those 6 companies sometime in April to make a recommendation of a potential change in our photography services for our, I think it's now twice a year that pictures are provided at each of our schools. I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit about this from technology, but there was some information that was provided about potential technology upgrades of touchscreen panel technology replacing the old Promethean boards. I remember when my wife went back to teaching, the Promethean boards were new. the panic over, using permanent marker on those and completely ruining those Promethean boards. But needless to say, that technology at this point is outdated. The projected costs of replacing 177 of those screens throughout the district over a 4-year period, which would be paid out of the capital reserves funds, or $129,000 year 1, $123,000 year 2, $107,000 year 3, and $126,000 year 4. Those are projected costs. I think there's further discussion that would take place, but that may be forthcoming before the board in the future. And then lastly, and obviously most importantly, there was, as mentioned in public comment tonight, Scott Kramer from Raymond James provided a financing update with the potential of borrowing additional funds for other Phase 2 projects, again with an eye towards if such funding would be approved and further borrowing, maintaining that debt service that we currently pay out at $10.9 million over the course of, and I just want to get this correct, as of right now, our debt service goes out to 2032 at that $10.9 million per year. And with potential further borrowing, that debt service at $10.9 million would go out to 2052. So further discussion, obviously, on a big picture with the district, but that financing update would be available to anyone in the public that wanted to take a look at that. And again, we're still working towards the completion of the 22-23 budget. Our next meeting is May 2nd, and hope to have better understanding of what next year's budget would look like. As always, getting the state to pass their budget in a timely manner does assist school districts in their preparation. So fingers crossed with that. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
I'm going to pass on that tonight, but I will give a full update at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Human Resources, Mr. Hart.
No report.
Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening. I just have a few items. First, we want to congratulate Spring Ridge Elementary School autistic support teacher Brittany Smith for being nominated for the Annie Sullivan Award. The Annie Sullivan Award program recognizes individuals in Berks County who encourage the understanding and promotion of students with disabilities in their school or community. Brittany was honored at a reception at the Berks County Intermediate Unit main office. So we just want to congratulate Brittany for all of her outstanding efforts on behalf of our students. We wanted to let the community know that Wilson High School is hosting a career fair on April 26th. During the fair, 20-plus vendors will be offering entry-level positions that are appropriate for students of all interests. The Wilson Career Fair is going to be open to juniors and seniors on April 26th, starting at 1 p.m., and then the rest of the student body starting at 1:35 p.m., and then the fair will run until 3 p.m. Also, tomorrow, all 9th grade students at Wilson High School will have the opportunity to visit local colleges through the Berks Business Education Coalition program. The partnership established between the BBEC and the district also provides our students with the ability to tour local businesses during the fall, giving them a well-rounded glimpse of the opportunities available to them post-graduation. And just another reminder, Mrs. Casper already mentioned this, but just another reminder that through our partnership with the Cook Center for Human Connection, we will be hosting a free virtual mental health night tomorrow night, which is April 20th, from 8 to 9 p.m. Participants will hear from a leading clinical psychologist, be able to ask questions and learn more about the free resources we now have available. And we are committed to continuing to work to provide solutions and help for those who are struggling through this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Troutman. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Yes, just a quick report. Yesterday was the first Wilson Education Foundation golf tournament. And despite the rain and the cold, I heard it was a great success. I would just, on behalf of the Education Foundation, I want to thank all the volunteers, the sponsors, the donors, and all the participants for making it such a successful event. With that said, there's still opportunity to participate. The 50/50 raffle is open until Friday at midnight, as well as the silent auction, which is open until Friday at midnight. There's QR codes. I don't know if one is on the way out, but you can go to websites and, for Wilson and find the links there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Technology Committee, Mr. McCray.
Unfortunately, a work issue prevented me from attending today's meeting, so I had to pass on to Mr. Schneider and thank him for doing a report in my absence.
Yeah, we got some updates on end of the year and over the summer professional development, as well as changes for next year being proposed for new teacher induction. We've seen a bit of a shift in the kind of new teachers we're getting. Instead of coming out of college, they're coming in seasoned because there just aren't the numbers coming out of college to get those fresh faces in the classrooms. So obviously the needs of an experienced teacher are somewhat different than that of a brand new teacher. So looking at shifting some of how that's done. Fingers crossed, Chromebooks will be here by August 11th. That is the hope. As with everything else, supply chain issues are there. We do have old ones available if we would need them to put back in service. We talked about wireless upgrades, as Mr. Negrini mentioned, the Promethean board replacements. We talked about insurance, cyber insurance premiums, and what being part of having multiple facets of security, how that lowers that cost for us. We got new fiber connection at the operations center, which will make it $400. Was it a month, Ryan? Right? Yeah, a month cheaper and about 10 times faster. They did a survey with the staff, with the Know Before program, about like where areas of cybersecurity concern exist within the staff, like what their skill level ability is, and so possible professional development with that. And we took an initial look at what the Chromebook fee schedule will be for the program next year.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Student Outreach, Ms. Negrini.
First of all, the Wilson Runway Club will be having a yard sale this upcoming Saturday outside of the auditorium entrance, and all of their proceeds go towards their annual spring fashion show. This is a club that was newly founded that lets kids participate in fashion design and photography, so they've been working on this all school year, and all of their proceeds will help them for this event. The Wilson Theater Company is wrapping up their 2021-22 season with their one-act play festival, which will be April 28th to the 30th. And all of these one-act plays will be directed by current seniors of this company. And lastly, for the past 2 weeks, the student body has been participating in a new event called Color Wars. This is a series of competitions amongst each of the 4 grade levels that is boosting a lot of school spirit as we wrap up the school year in areas of sports, music, art, trivia, and more. Every Tuesday for the next month up until the last week of May, each of the grade levels will compete in various competitions to earn points for their grade level, and there's going to be a big end-of-the-year send-off where they announce the winner of each of the grade levels.
Thank you, Ms. Negrini. That sounds, the last part, Color War, sounds really like innovative, fun activity. It's great. Mr. Maravich, do we have any solicitor update?
I just wanted to thank Mrs. Carroll, who puts all of this together, and even though this was a holiday weekend, she worked very diligently to get changes on the agenda and the right attachments to the right matters. And I think there's probably 20 people in some form, whether it's vendors or administrators or our office, sending her things, and she seems to be that traffic cop who directs everything and gets it done. And with respect to 8.2, so there's no confusion, I did not ask her to change those dates, so that was on me. I don't want there to be a misunderstanding that she didn't change them. It was my fault. But again, just thank her so much, because although this all looks great and is great for the public to see documents and attachments. It is a significant amount of work that's undertaken by Ms. Carroll, and is able to pull all this together, and I'll make it seem like as if there's never any mistakes. And it's just a tremendous amount of work, and I just thank her.
Thank you. Mrs. Carroll, I don't have any papers. We have 0 non-agenda item, correct? Correct. Okay, thank you. Any other issues or topics for the board that anybody would like to discuss? Okay, then I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you.